So welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, wherever you are in this world. And hoping to keep things together for just one day at a time and no future or past thinking, just trying to stay in the moment. And the best way I know how to do that is with cats that basically have made a living practicing meditation on the bandstand. They may have their other disciplines out off the bandstand to find equilibrium, but it's very vexing to me, and it's already shown very apparent to me that so many people in the arts, in so many different artistic mediums, are facing I don't know what the right word is. The mental health toll of being stripped away of your livelihood is very intense and cruel. And I have people that I already know that we've lost, not due to the virus itself, but due to the depression and the darkness that has been incurred because everything that made them feel useful has been taken away from them. Rick Laird, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hi, Jake. Thanks for having me on.
It's an honor to have you, man. I had such a great time with you last time we did it. I had a spirit brother, nobody that I considered a best friend, but Tucsonin. He did something called acro yoga, which is like a combination of acrobatic yoga, and it's it requires you to be in great shape. And he also had a food truck, and he was a dynamic. He was an artist through and through, and he had a beautiful daughter, and he walked out of his house last week and never came home, and they found him dead in the desert. And I just wanted to ask you. I know you're not like you're not playing three sets a night, 6 nights a week anymore, but can you talk about what it must be like for creatives and for musicians who are not playing popular music to have that taken away, and what you might do if you started to feel useless because whatever you did for your livelihood or work was just abruptly taken away?
Ooh, it's a deep subject, man.
Go as deep as you want, man.
Well, I totally agree with what you said before about what's going on in the performing arts. It's absolutely tragic. There's just no other word for it. It's devastating, And of course, in the context of what's going on in the larger society and the world, even, it's difficult to single out one group as suffering because so many are. I mean, every single category of life you can imagine out there is having a really difficult time. But since our world is the world of performing arts, and, I think about it every day, man. I think about all my friends and colleagues, not absolutely awful, and I can understand why it can get very dark for people.
Can you talk about that? I want you, because for me, I deal with depression as well, and some people, they don't want to put anything impure or like psychotropic drugs in their body, so they work out a lot, they eat really well, and they work their ass off, and then something unpredictable happens, and this darkness comes in where they say, I cannot bear this anymore. I don't know what that feels like because I do use Western medicine to keep myself balanced, but can you relate to that darkness? I mean, can you understand how dark it can be? Because I just couldn't maybe I'm just too selfish or something, but I could not leave my daughters. You know, I couldn't just check out no matter what. Again, that's just a naive middle class white boy talking. But can you talk a little bit about this? How dark can be?
Well, I guess as dark as you can get is to take yourself out, which is as dark as it can be, obviously. Now, my trust is this, that because we're creators, musicians, singers, writers, actors, we're creators. Um, I have faith that a lot of us, will figure out, well, I can try different things. I can recreate myself by practicing a whole different way and dedicate myself to do that. But of course, the real question is, if you're not financially stable to do that, then you can't do that.
That's right.
And of course, all gig workers, not just jazz musicians and rock musicians, etc., never had a job to begin with, so they didn't get the $600 a week, right? That workers got.
Right. That's right.
And still won't get it because no one is standing up for the arts community. Nobody. There's no one in Congress saying we need to provide income for all the artists who've been stripped of their income. No one's talking about that, and they really need to be.
I mean, me and you were like, culture vultures, and you are like, like you love photography, and you're like, steeped in it, and like you obviously, like last time we talked, it helps to know the history, but I mean, I ask you face value, in your mind, is it just that people that are in congressional seats, I don't care what party, everything is under a microscope today. So because of the unquantifiable magic and healing nature of music or art, it's not quantifiable. So there's no data to back up that it's valuable in a quantifiable system. So therefore, it must just be the musician's or the artist's gift to the world, and that's why nobody is standing up. I mean, is there some validity to that? Why do you believe? I mean, there's always been fights about how much to give the National Education and Arts NEA. There's always been, but I mean, again, coming from, I don't know about Ireland, but I mean, most of the clubs in Europe, they were always subsidized, right, by the government. So I just, where do you come down? Are we in this nihilistic period where, I mean, obviously, the cat who's in charge of the show right now, he has, I mean, his concept of art is like, watching, Mike Tyson at Caesar's Plaza boxing or something, which is a WrestleMania, it's not, so he doesn't even have that understanding. But at the congressional level, why do you believe that there is zero people standing up for something that was incredibly significant in social change, whether people knew it at the time or not?
Because there's no advocacy for it. That's the simple answer. There's no in other words, if Mike Bloomberg, for example, or Bill now and say we need to get money, cash money, to everyone who is a legitimate artist. In other words, you have a track record of making your living from performing, whether it's dancing, music, singing, Broadway acting, whatever you are. If you have a track record of professional activity, you should be entitled to $600 a week or whatever they determine, and get it to them immediately.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, that's all there is to it. And
but I guess, I mean, like, let me just say, like, so that this, like you said, people that lost their gigs, things that are considered jobs, they get $600. So I guess what Congress is really saying is being a professional musician is not really a job. I'll never forget
Exactly.
Charlie
That's
Persip.
right.
Charlie Persip was like, him and Dizzy, like if club owners like, were like, oh, you're playing music, they're like, we're not playing, man. Like, this is work, this is a hard.
No shit. No
we're
shit.
not somehow playing connotates fun, and therefore I don't know. It's a beautiful, it's a really tragic situation.
Well, it's the same old shit that's been going on forever. First of all,
is it though? Because I feel better when you say that, but I don't think it is.
Well, it's a continuation. Let's just say, put it in the context of Black Lives Matter, for example, right?
Right.
Jazz musicians, because all of the great originators were generally Black American musicians, was never valued by the corporations because they couldn't see any big money in it. Like I said before recently, there are no jazz billionaires,
You told me, I love that line, dude. There are no jazz billionaires, yeah.
Right. And which is insane because it's such an incredibly beautiful art form, not to mention all the other arts too, like rock, the Black musicians who created rock and roll that the Stones copied and the Beatles copied,
Absolutely.
And it's a question of values, Jake. Nancy Pelosi was talking this morning about it's not about the money, it's about the values, right? And the arts have never really been valued in this country in that way because corporations say, well, we're never going to get really rich on this stuff, which is insane because it's not about the money. It's about the value of what it brings to society. Whether you love jazz or hillbilly music or whatever it is, if you listen to music and you get some value from it, it changes your state of mind. Like right now, if I put on Kind of Blue, my whole day will change.
Yeah, I dig, man. No, I mean, I feel that way about like Lionel Hampton's Greatest Disco record with you and Mike Knock. That always makes me happier. It makes it changes my mood. My daughters, we can dance. All of a sudden, we're engaged with human beings, but none of this stuff, there's no bottom line to it. So the corporate, there's also something to be said for, the bean counters, corporate America was not as unbridled and insane as it is now. And there was a period of time when, I'd say by and large, the artists like John and you guys, Billy, you and Jan, and like people like the Doors, ultimately, certain companies, record companies at a time when there was a record industry, they recognized that they were making a profit, so they allowed the musicians to create the art and focus on the art. And maybe you guys didn't become billionaires, but the music was a great representation of what you guys were doing in that moment. And so now it's just about, well, let's create something that's going to generate profit, even if it sucks. So the idea of like, there was this pocket of time in the late 60s and early 70s when, I don't know, there were boutique labels and the bean counters they were like, well, we're making dough, and then it got egregious, and then it got insane, and I know you kind of straddled you really, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were not like ensconced in radio registry, like waiting for the phone to ring, like, all these other cats that I've interviewed. You were very selective about the recording sessions that you were on. I just, somehow this idea of, in this time, with all the carnage and all the immorality at the top and all the lack of decency, it's scary because the thing that would make most sense to me in terms of healing is art, is music, is vibration, and obviously the virus prevents that. But even before, musicians now, Rick, as you know, my peers, who are road dogging it because that's the only way you can make money, they're part of the working poor now. That was before coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, it's never been easy. Even before the virus, it's never been easy to make a living as a musician. I can tell you that from being a musician for 22 years.
I know. You did
You know,
okay though, right? I mean, you did. You. There was a period. Was there a period of time, especially the days that you were cranking at Ronnie Scott's back at playing all those nights, and I mean, even Mahavishnu. I'm, those colleges, those universities were filled to capacity. Do you feel like there was a time in your career where you did feel like you were getting ahead doing what you were meant to do, playing music?
yeah, but there were intermittent periods. I mean, after my audition, I felt, yeah, that was probably as far as up to that point, the most successful venture I'd been involved in. But it was downhill from there, and I kind of knew that, and I kind of had already programmed myself to leave music.
Now explain why you already had that intuition.
Because I understood that my talent did not warrant a lifetime.
Whoa, that is a really. I need you to. That is. What does that mean?
That's called the truth. Dave.
No, that's called old school, man. Like that's walking. I mean, is it the idea of well, I've really my chops are only music is different than sports because there are certain athletes that retire, they get out when they're at the top of their game. But in music, if you are ultimately somewhat together, you can continue to get better as you get older. So it wasn't like you had maxed out your you always wanted to learn. I mean, it
Yes,
just
well,
yeah.
yes, I mean, but Mahavishnu finished in '74, and I continued playing till about '82, and I would say that by 80, '82, I was playing better than I'd ever played in my life.
Wow.
And I was free, and I was no longer looking for anything. It was like, just enjoy it. Just enjoy it, you know. And at that point, I was ready to quit.
That is
Because,
so because it was so but you were feeling so good, but I guess it was so insulting because there was just no money.
oh, there was absolutely no money.
Absolutely no money.
Right.
82.
Yeah. I mean, I barely made enough to live in my tiny apartment in New York, but I was beginning to start photography, and I had a plan laid out how to continue doing that. And when I put the bass down, I believe it was the last gig was uh, at the Waldorf Hotel on New Year's '83, right?
Oh, this is so beautiful. What was the
Oh, it was just a regular gig, in a bar, with three other musicians. It paid well because it's New Year's and tuxedo and all that stuff. And it was, just a nonsense gig, with people singing "Old Lang Syne." I mean, it wasn't a gig. It wasn't a jazz gig by
no.
any stretch, you know. And that was the last gig I ever
Wait,
played.
so that was New Year's Eve 82 going into 83 or 83 going
83, January 1, '83. Yeah.
and how long I mean you never went back to the bass.
I never picked it up again, Jake.
Oh man, I am reeling right. I mean, this is heavy stuff, man. This is really heavy stuff coming from somebody who's like a
Well, I knew the truth. And the truth was I was not terribly talented. I was a good bass player, occasionally a very good bass player, but certainly not enough to justify committing to a lifetime. Plus poverty sucks. That was my experience. I can't speak for anybody else. I'm just saying from my experience of being a bass player for hire in New York, I can tell you poverty sucks. right?
Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, I bet. I mean, I'm sorry, but I mean, you played with a lot of the original masters of the music, and
Well, I'll tell
would
you
you say at a
something.
certain point, like, I mean, I always talk to cats, I ask them the question that, they're not singing for bliss, or they're not doing it to get into some bliss state. They're doing it to freaking live. And did you ever have a point in your career when, because you're talking about talent, but to me it's more like, I mean, the excitement and the opportunities weren't there, less so. And I wonder, was there ever a point when when you felt like music was the only thing you could do? And I think that's the tragic part of this
Oh,
situation is that, yeah.
that was my state of mind for most of the time. It was only by kind of a chance encounter that I was reintroduced to photography by when I went to our first Mahavishnu trip to Montreux. Somehow I went with a camera, and I remember doing it as a kid, and the whole thing kind of came back to me as an expression of art, something else to play with. And so I was triggered again, and of course Billy Cobham was a big fan. He had all kinds of cameras then. And so when next time we went to Japan that year, I bought myself some Nikons and some, professional stuff, and came back to New York. And when the band ended, I got deep into photography. I studied. I had a guru and all that stuff.
A
Photography.
photography guru.
Well, not, yeah.
I mean,
Guru.
and so how long did it take you to, I don't know, for lack of a better word, monetize it?
10 years.
Yeah, it sounds like the Jake Feinberg show. I mean,
Well,
yeah, and then even then it's not a lot, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, you had enough money tucked away for 10 years where you could cultivate a new livelihood.
Well, no, because I continued playing right up to the end. And I was also teaching in New York. I had maybe, 6, 8 students a week who came to my apartment.
I'm sorry, that's right. You were at Montreux in 73, 74, and then
Right.
you kept playing till 82, in New Year's 83.
Right.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Montreux was actually, I believe, 72, I believe.
Right. And then
Yeah.
you went to Japan in 73, and then after that, did the band
Right.
break up after that, I think?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
That's right. So what I wanted to get to, though, while we're
Yeah, do it,
talking,
please.
is want to go back to our original discussion about the current situation, because one of the things that I've been blessed with, one of the talents, or whatever you want to call it, is reinventing myself, right? I gave up being a musician. I love being a musician. The early years at Ronnie Scott's were just an amazing experience. I mean, I wouldn't trade that for anything. That was masterclass on steroids. This month,
In the
Sonny
moment,
Rollins,
honest learning. Yeah, so beautiful.
you're just on the stage this month with Sonny Rollins. Next month it's Wes Montgomery. Next month it's Ben Webster. And this goes on for almost 2 years. I mean, how could you get a better training than that?
You can't.
It was on stage 6 nights a week, kicking ass. That's it. And that's what I love to do. And that's the point. Is what I was getting to is, by the time the late 70s into the 80s came, a lot of things had changed in music. A lot of guys were playing electric bass only, straight ahead, jazz that I loved, the kind of blues style of music that I loved, was not terribly popular anymore. It was kind of over. It was historic already. And I was never like a featured bass player. I never felt the urge to sound like Stanley Clarke or Jocko or Marcus Miller. It just never appealed to me.
Absolutely, yeah.
I said, those guys are great. I don't want to do any of that. I love being a bass player. I like to be the guy that lays down the groove, plays the right notes at the right time, in support of what's going on around me. And that was what I loved to do, right? I didn't care about soloing or being featured or being cool or hip, Be a good bass player. That's what Ray Brown taught me when I studied his work. Just be a great bass player. You don't have to do anything else, you know. Anyway, back to the point of the current scene by
Yeah, please.
reinventing. What I mean by reinventing was now even as far ago as about 2 years ago, I sort of rediscovered photography in the form of my cell phone. I got
Yeah, the best cameras in the world, man.
I got myself a really good iPhone. I think it was the iPhone 7 Plus was the
Yes.
first good one. And I started going insane with the apps. I thought, oh my God, the stuff you can do in here, I couldn't even imagine when I was in the dark room
Right,
with my,
right. And
you know,
it's so easy with just a couple of thumbs or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
right here on the phone. You don't even have to go anywhere. You just take the photo and then apply the app. So I started to get into it. And then I thought, geez, I could teach this. I could teach people how to do this. So I started contacting all the libraries around my area and made a proposal that I would teach classes. And so I did. And I went there in person and did a 1.5 hour class, you know, with a big screen where I would project my phone onto the screen, right? Like a really nice
Sure.
high class projector. There's my phone on the screen. Here's the pictures, and here's how you do it. And most of them were very successful. Some of them had 15 people, some of them had 40 people, you know, and they paid me money, right? I mean, not a lot of money. I didn't expect to,
No, it was a
make an.
gig though. It was a gig.
It was a great thing to do. It was
Yeah.
a lot of fun. I love sharing that kind of experience. And of course, now comes along the freaking virus, and it's like, when it started, I think I had 4 more classes to do, and that all ended. So about a month later, I started using Zoom. And so now I teach iPhone photography classes on Zoom all over the place for mostly libraries, sometimes schools, right? I'm starting a school in September. And I plan to export this everywhere. I plan to do it in London, in Sydney, wherever I can, right?
What is the just if I was taking the class as just some like what would you want me to? What are the group the tenets that you would want somebody to get out of? I mean, everybody has their own path.
Well,
It's
most people have a phone with a camera on it. Not all iPhones. I only teach iPhone, but it does apply to Androids too, I guess. I just don't know about
I don't
Androids.
either. I've only had I tell you the picture I am not a professional photographer, but I love. I mean, I don't know. It's pretty remarkable. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's a remarkable camera just as it is, but I'm approaching it from a fine art perspective.
Mm-hmm.
My philosophy when I teach is we don't take photos, we make them, right?
Wow.
Now, if you want to see my work, go to Instagram. It's richard.laird.566, and you can see all
Oh,
of my
dude, I
work.
just joined Instagram. I'm gonna follow you right away.
Yeah, you can see all the work there,
Oh,
right?
cool.
And I'm posting all the time. A couple of times a week, I post a picture of some kind. I'm always playing around.
But I guess what I'm saying is you're able to take what makes it a niche that you can now go to schools and go across the world to work and I mean to make some dough.
Yeah, well, mostly because, as I said, most people have an iPhone who have iPhones, and many of them are quite happy with, taking selfies. Just they don't do anything, just take the picture, and that's fine. But other people are curious, like, well, there's all, it's an amazing camera, but I don't really know how to use it fully, to exploit it. And so that's what I teach. I teach the 7 basic things I teach that will change your photography immediately.
The exploitation of the iPhone camera.
Yes.
I love that, dude. Bravo. I mean, you know, so we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I'm gonna put this in for you. I want to see if you can get this. Pay attention to the content, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I was more inspired and more interested in Eric.
Explain why.
Because his approach to music was, I understood and appreciated his approach to music more than John Coltrane's. I think a lot of John Coltrane's popularity had to do with his lining up his playing with the LSD mood of the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you? This is really important. I mean, Chuck, you're nailing it. But I mean, my second book came out about the Merry Pranksters and Ken Kesey, and there really wasn't. Of course, they were giving a lot of LSD to people. You're saying Train was channeling. Was he on psychedelics in the late 50s?
I have no idea. I doubt it. No. How can I express this usefully? His music is trance music.
Yeah, it is.
Eric's music is both emotionally driving and intellectually driven. It has the variety in if there's variety in Coltrane's music, it's covered up by too much repetition. And that is not true of Eric's music.
That is really well put. And it's not that's not a judgment on whether it's good or bad. It's just that's just what it is.
Yes, I have my own value system that functions for me, but there's a certain objectivity in that. That is, in fact, Coltrane's music is enormously repetitive. It's very fast, covers a lot of ground, over and 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 over again. And Eric's music is more the form and design of it is more important and perhaps more apparent. I'm a bigger fan of Monk and Eric than of Coltrane.
Rick Laird, you want to take a guess at who that is?
Wow, we had no idea really.
Well, I did say Chuck.
Yes.
And as far as I'm concerned, I consider you in the same. Even though you put the bass down, I consider you guys to be in a very similar discussion as a bass fiddle player. Is that Chuck Israels, and that was an interview I just did with him a couple weeks ago, and I was loving the honesty of, but it was also revelatory to me that he was making this split. Well, there was always a split, at least reading liner notes in the early 60s. You'd hear people say that Archie Shepp or Train, they were playing angry message music versus someone like Stan Getz, who was playing beautiful, lilting, melodic music, and that might have just been, I don't know, just journalists just doing their thing. But can you do you feel similar? I'm not saying you agree with him, but this delineation between Dolphy's form, beginning, middle, and end, sort of a definitive song, versus Train's trance music, where do you come down? And are there other people that should be part of the conversation?
I've never really thought about that, but yeah, I mean, I suppose you could say Train was trance music. It depends what period, because he did change the way he played.
I think we're talking like Love Supreme, kind of, where he's just doing the
Yeah.
raga-esque scales, that kind of thing.
Right, right. Yeah, at that stage, I would say it was definitely trance music. I could certainly imagine a room full of people on acid sitting there listening to it.
We need this, even with masks. We need that stuff. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so yes, I always liked Eric's a very thoughtful player. He didn't waste any notes. Not that Train was wasting notes. I'm
No.
not saying that.
No.
It's just a different way of communicating. Eric was very selective in his in the way he produced sound and his choice of notes. Yeah, a very different animal altogether. Yeah.
Did you play with Dolphy at Lonnie Scott's, or any chance? Did you ever get a chance?
No. We didn't get any of those guys. We got more or less mainstream jazzers. We didn't get Train. We got Bill Evans for a month, which was great at the time.
Oh my God! You played.
No, I didn't play. No, Chuck.
Chuck was there. Of course, Chuck was there. Yeah, with Paul Motion.
No, not Paul Motion. It was Larry Bunker.
Oh my God! This is so heavy, man. Jesus. I mean.
Yeah, in fact, there's a YouTube of that group in black and white and a BBC. Just type Bill Evans London, and you'll get it.
Anytime I can see Larry Bunker playing the kit.
Yeah, he played great. Yeah.
Was there because it's interesting. I know that you were pretty busy, obviously, with the orchestra, but I wonder about. I remember, when Train died, they were, as usual, at least the journalists were trying to find this torchbearer of, when I hear Train's, when they call it trance music, I actually hear it as prayer music, in some ways, sometimes Mahavishnu got to that point too, but when I listened to Train, I can hear just cries. It just seems like he's praying. It's chanting almost. And I remember reading somewhere that they thought Joe Farrell was going to be the next Train or something, and I listened to Farrell, and he's amazing. Did you play gigs with other cats when you were off the road with the orchestra?
Good. I play with Eddie Daniels a lot in New York. Clarinet.
Oh yeah, dude, he's a great. Wait, so because a lot of people get horny to when you're off the road, you just want to have maybe just a. Where were you going? Were you playing Smalls, or are you going was that even open then?
No, actually, yeah. I didn't really. I don't recall doing many gigs at all because when we got off the road, man, all you wanted to do was sleep.
Yeah, for weeks.
For weeks.
Yeah, weeks.
Sleep and eat and drink and do other cool things, but not play.
Did you I talked to my friends today, and the more disciplined ones who have been. I guess maybe ask you. Did you know that you had to develop some kind of balanced routine on a day-to-day basis with those 2-month long tours in order to keep it's so easy to just get wrapped up in debauchery on the road and carnage. And I know John was doing his thing, and some people thought it was, like Billy always thought it was kind of ridiculous that he would ask people to pray before the show. But during the day, did you go out of your way to have a routine where you would get up in the morning and go somewhere, yoga studio or whatever? Just something where you weren't sleeping till 2 or 3 and then getting up and getting completely blasted out of your mind and then getting on stage, because that you wouldn't make it.
No. My recollection is that we were on the road so much for so long with such intensity, I would categorize it as virtually complete chaos. There
That
was no
is so
plans.
ridiculous. Virtual. It was chaos.
Complete chaos. There was no plan at all. It was like this, Jake. Play Philadelphia Saturday, right? Get on a plane early Sunday morning. Play Los Angeles Sunday night. The next gig you have is Tokyo, right? But instead of going directly to Tokyo, we went. Jan and me and Jerry went from L.A. to Oahu to stay by a hotel by the surf, and we stayed there for a week, and then we joined John and Billy and Jerry on a plane from there to Tokyo. But it was so intense that you wake up in Tokyo and say, "Where the hell am I?" You look at
I mean, this is on top of, like, I've been watching more of you since we had that first cosmic discussion, and you were talking about, just the amplifiers, just, all the stacks of, and you guys are just, I mean, as a patron walking out of there, I can't even imagine how you can't fake that music. So it's like, personally, how did you, amidst the chaos or, just sort of the warp speed that you were going at, was it just you had no time to really do any past or future thinking, and therefore you were able to authentic?
nothing.
So you were
Nothing.
able to get on stage and be in the moment because you were completely in your body. I mean, you had no anxiety about the past or the future or anything like that.
I wouldn't go nearly as far as that as to say that I was present on the stage. It was many times, I can tell you, I wasn't there at all. I think that goes for all of us.
What does that mean to you?
Well, it just means, you're so exhausted. You've entered 3 different time zones in the last week. You don't know what city you're in, what time of day it is. You haven't eaten for like 15 hours, and you didn't sleep good last night. But here you are on a stage. It's tough, man. It's not the way people think it is. It's just not that way. It's really tough. Nothing romantic about it. Nothing. Right.
Do you feel like sometimes when you're in, putting aside the logistical stuff, is there a memory you have of being, like, incredibly ill or so?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But did you play your best that time because all you were focused on was just making it through the gig, and you weren't worried about anything other than survival? I've talked to cats who literally were like on the bandstand with pneumonia, and can you talk about that sort of primordial experience when you feel like death, and yet you let all your...
Well, it's just it's the ethics of professionalism. You always, the show must go on. It's 9:00, you're on, and it doesn't matter what state you're in. You get the job done, and it wouldn't happen a lot. I would have a flu maybe for a week, and we'd have 2 or 3 gigs, and I just kind of stumble through them, and based on professional experience, you just do the best you can. But it didn't happen a lot. I had a sprained ankle once, I think. But we all have stuff, and you get on stage and do the best you can. And, I'm sure that's true for everyone. Actors do the same thing,
Well, let me ask you, maybe in 2000, long before the Jake Feinberg Show even existed, I made a phone call. Somehow I called Carnegie Mellon University, and this was pre 9/11, so of course they gave me the number to the head of the jazz department. His name was Eric Kloss. And Eric, if there was one cat that inspired me to get into a certain kind of music that I am still into today, it was Eric Kloss. And I called him and had what I didn't know at the time, but we had what now I can say is the conversations that I have with you guys every day. It was pretty heavy, it was spiritual, and he was recommending me reading Siddhartha, and I was in somewhat awe. I couldn't believe I was speaking to him. And then the next time I called him, his wife, who I'm not going to say anything bad about her, but she wouldn't let me talk to him. And then I was living in Boston, and within an hour, I got a call from rural Pennsylvania police, wherever they lived outside of Pittsburgh, saying, "Are you harassing the classes?" And I said, "No, of course not." And
Wow.
and yet Eric was, and I say this out loud, and I say he was directly responsible, because what I saw at that time was somebody who had no primary sense. I mean, we are 90% visual. I don't need to tell you that, being a photographer. 90% of what we take in is visual. And, here's this guy who's, maybe somewhere between a savant and a prodigy in Rudy Van Gelder's studios, and Don Schlitten is putting him with Booker Irvin, Richard Davis, Jackie Byard, and Alan Dawson. And I'm like, whoa, this is America? I was in my 20s. I was like, this is so freaking hip. And then, going into the darker, unfortunately, what you talked about in the 70s, when you knew the writing was on the wall, some of the iconic records from that decade post-orchestra with you are with Eric and with Vic Juris and with Richie Cole and, the Tin Palace and some of my
Right.
favorite freaking I mean, how did you connect with Eric originally?
I don't recall that at all, to be
Yeah, I knew
quite.
that. I knew you were going to say
I
that.
do remember the Tin Palace, and I remember Eddie Gladden, right?
Oh yeah, great unheralded drummer.
Right, right, right. Uh,
You played on
yeah,
all these. You were like kind of like a Joe. Like you got connected to Muse though. I mean, how did you? Because they were calling you for backing up Eddie Jefferson, and I mean,
well, it was part of Richie Cole's group. He was the backing group for Eddie Jefferson. So we did a few records at Muse, and we did quite a few concerts in Connecticut and around the place with Eddie, who was such tragic the way he died. He was shot, you know.
was he shot by
God,
his son or so? Was he murdered?
he was murdered. I don't know the details at all. I just know that it was a terribly tragic type of thing.
What was it like to play behind? Was he like? I mean, you listen to the records sometimes, and some of them are live. There's a couple that you were on that were live, but was it essentially different? Every song was never played the same way once every night, or did it get to be a formula trip, or would he?
Oh no, he improvised. He was in the spirit of Lambert Henriksen Ross, who I played with also back in the day.
You did.
Oh yeah, that was my first European gig was with Lambert Henriksen Ross. Yeah,
Wow. It was a tour.
the tour, 3-week tour. Yeah, 1962, and all over Germany. I was 21 years old. Yeah.
You felt like Eddie was somewhere between that and like
Yeah, he was in that bebop singer. No, he didn't
he
do
wasn't like
it.
he wasn't like spiritual Leon Thomas. It was more bebop, I guess.
Bebop,
Yeah.
very, very bebop, very bebop. Yeah, I mean that was his thing, and he did that really great. You know, no, it was never. It was different every night. He was an improviser. He'd make it up. But he had formulas. I mean, he had lyrics to jazz solos. In other words, this might have been a well-known saxophone solo, but he put lyrics to that kind of thing, right? So he'd sing it the same every night.
It's pretty hip. I mean, did you when I noticed I told you last time when did you first meet Joe Henderson?
He called me for a tour. Let's see, that's '76, I think it was.
What, the record you made with him?
Yeah, I
Yeah, it was
was
like
in New
70. I
York.
think it was came out in 77, but maybe it was made in 76 or something like that.
Yeah, it was made in '76. So he called me in the fall of '76. I was in New York, just gigging around. He said, "Do you want to do a European tour?" And I said, "If I can play electric bass, yes, not upright bass, because there's no way I was going to schlep an upright around Europe. Just not interested. Thank you, you know." So anyway, that's what I did. I took my nice little bass guitar, which I don't remember what model it was, but that's what I used. And off we went. It was very tough. It was an incredibly, insanely difficult tour.
Why?
Well, because we had a producer, Wim Vicht was his name. Wim Vicht was all done by train. No planes or buses. You take a train to the next place.
Oh man.
and
Oh
and
my
it
God.
was
Thank God you
absolutely,
didn't have the upright, dude.
oh my God, with a suitcase and an amplifier. Yeah, right. uh,
like, was there a couple of gigs on the tour that made it worth? I mean, Joe's playing was somewhat shamanistic, but he at that time he was also highly unreliable due to substance abuse. I mean, was he whimsical and did you have fun with him on like
oh yeah.
he always seemed to be very all the cats like Ron McClure people I talked to he was always like he just was so far above everything all this crap that we're mired in today. I mean he's probably rolling over in his grave because he was always just so far above all that stuff. At least that's what I've been told.
Yeah, I mean, he was obviously a great player. I mean, I had tremendous respect for his playing. Very one of a kind player. And yes, he was pretty easy to work with. I mean, he was a strict disciplinarian. You had to, play the way he wanted you to play, which was fine. Um, but I think the physical stress of the gig, the physicality of travel and staying in miserable hotels, and the money was terrible,
Jeez.
you know.
I mean, that sounds like it's almost not worth it. I mean,
It's not worth. No, it's not
it's
worth it.
not worth. That's
It's
really
not
why
worth.
you left, though. That's. I mean, what you just said is just. I talked to the same guys, younger cats today, playing different kind of music, but they have to wear. Think about Joe Henderson having to wear 8 hats instead of just being a band leader, like where he would have to handle everything. That's what happens today with cats.
Right,
The
right.
artist has to handle everything. So you're on the phone all day. You're dealing with stuff that otherwise you would normally have, other things, resources built in, and the money. It almost makes it not worth it unless you just have the bug so bad that, and you still were like not ready to. For me, in some ways, it's always just. Um,
Well, I
it,
mean, it was tough for Joe, for example, because these were smallish gigs. They weren't all big 2,500 people concerts. Some of them were. We took a train once in Norway in a raging blizzard. The train trip was about 9 hours, something like an amazingly long time because the snow was so heavy. And you get to the town, and the hotel is like a brothel, literally a brothel. You're hearing people screwing, and
yeah.
you hear people screwing in the next room, right?
Oh my,
And
jeez.
the gig was in the basement with an upright piano out of tune.
I got to tell you, I, I'd pay if I had any money. I'd pay anything to be at that gig. I mean, it would be very uncomfortable to feel comfortable settling in and playing in that environment. But when I think of like where I'd want to see Joe Henderson and Rick Laird, that's exactly where I'd want to see you guys play. But so that you'd walk away sort of just with that. I mean, did you feel kind of like dirty after that? I mean, did you walk out of there like feeling used or something, or did it feel what was the most gratifying thing? Just those moments of on the bandstand where you were happy?
Well, you do the best you can. You have to do the gig regardless, right? I mean,
Right.
the people. I don't remember any details other than we had to get up at 6 a.m. to get a train back to Sweden, right? And we got through it by drinking a lot of schnapps because we didn't have any weed because you can't walk around with weed in Europe.
You
Back
couldn't
in the
really in the Netherlands. I get. I'm yeah. Well, Miles. I don't know what the
Yeah.
laws were like back. Yeah. You
Well,
couldn't bring any weed on the plane or anything like that.
no, nothing like that. So you had schnapps. You buy it at the train station. These little bottles.
Oh, jeez.
And at 6 in the morning, you drink 2 or 3 of those. You fall asleep on the train because it's going to be 7 hours till you get to the next place. And the
Man.
hotel there sucks, and the food sucks, and you still have to do the gig.
And
And that's
there was no per diem. You couldn't go out and get a bite to eat.
no. You had a fixed amount of money. I think it was $400 a week, out of which you had to pay the hotel bills too.
Well, I'm glad you brought up this. I'm going to play this, name this voice. I did this interview back in January of 2016, and I'm interested to know if you can. It's kind of it's a meandering story, but enjoy it, and we'll come back.
Okay.
Um, Basically, I saw him play. He was about the same age as me. We were about 17 or 18 years old, and I saw him playing in a gig in a pub. And the next time I went out, well, as much as I could, I would call him to do gigs with me, and we would go out. We did. Sorry, man.
It's okay.
We did a lot of particularly on the weekends, of playing for American troops, airmen, and soldiers on the Air Force bases and the Army bases, not only around London but further out, up north, Lake and Heath.
Wow. Wow.
And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so we would play at like the officers' club, or mainly at the kind of NCOs and the enlisted men's clubs. And so, I had an agent. He would call me and say, "Do you want to do a weekend?" I would, then call people round, and and John and I did a lot of those gigs.
That is awesome. So it was organ. It was like an organ trio with a guitar, drums.
Well, it was. I don't know whether it was organ at the time. It was piano. Piano trio with drums and guitar and bass, like an upright bass. And the thing was, what we learned to do right away is a master at arms one night came up and said, "Hey guys, if somebody else should have played the Yellow Rose of Texas, don't do it." And I said, "Really? I wonder why not?" No, just don't do it, man. Take my word for it. And he said, "And if somebody comes up and asks you to play Yankee Doodle Dandy, don't do that either." He says, "I don't want any trouble here and no riots."
Hold on. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, what was the? Tell me. What was John? John was playing what instrument?
He was playing a Gretsch Kentuckian, and in a kind of a pale green color, and also he was amazing, man, because he played so much like Wes Montgomery in those days.
Really?
And he also was a devotee of a guy called Tal Farlow, a guitar player.
I know Tao. He's a.
All right, Rick Laird. Who is that?
That's Brian Ogre.
Yes, my friend, and I just feel like so gratified to be able to be on this this mission and journey to be able to, talk to all you guys. You guys are some of the last remaining vestiges, in my mind, even though as unglamorous as we've been talking, of like this really beautiful time, and you. I just wanted you to. One thing that turned you off about music was that it went from, like the orchestra was definitely, even though John was the front man, it was a team. You go back to Horace Silver's bands or Train's bands, it was always a band, and then you use this word. You used this word early in the interview that kind of was a turn off for you, which was that you never wanted to be a featured artist. You look at the 70s, it was like Alphonso Johnson or Stanley Clarke, any bass players, you became featured, and then everything else became, the band became less significant. They may still be written on the back who played, but it was the featured artist.
Right.
When you connected with Brian and the Trinity, or whatever, I mean, was it communal? Is that what made it so intoxicating? Is that it was just, it was always about the band, and it didn't matter, even the leader themselves could care less about being the leader?
Oh, yeah. No, we were very, very in unison about that. We wanted to sound like the Wynton Kelly Trio.
Right. You were searching for a sound. It's so cool.
We were looking to burn as hard as we possibly could.
That's it. So explain that mentality. I mean, that came
Well,
from.
we listened to Miles all day. We listened to Art Blakey. We listened to the best jazz, all day long. I smoked weed all day long.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. I can't smoke weed all day long because I'll be highly unproductive. But I mean, I'm with you, man.
I practiced as much as I could. If I wasn't practicing, I was listening, and if I wasn't listening, I was doing a gig. Right? So it was deep. It was full immersion from all of us. Right? We were in it. We were in it to play. Right? It was great. I mean, it was a great time. I had tremendous respect for Brian. He was kind of a guardian angel for me around that time in my life. Things were difficult.
Can you talk about how he was a guardian angel for you?
Yes. Well, I had a rather, shall we say, '63, and finished up in mental wards for a while. It wasn't about drugs or recovery. It was some other shit that I don't want to get into. But
I just want to, you cut out there for a minute. I know you don't have to get into it, but like I know that Pat Martino is a dear friend, and he talked to me about having headaches due to an undiagnosed brain tumor, and in the 70s he was like raging and really depressed, and they just thought he was depressed and manic, and they threw him in locked wards. So it was just I guess.
Yeah, no, it wasn't quite as dark as that for me, but I had some issues.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so so you were getting out, and was he one of the first cats that you?
Well, he showed up while I was actually in an institution. It wasn't heavy, dark stuff. It was just a light thing. But he showed up and he said, "I'm putting a group together. When you feel better, let me know." And so I took about another 6 months off. I went back to Dublin and lived with my father for a while, and didn't play at all. Just quit the whole thing for about 3 months. And then I got a phone call from Brian in September, and he said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I flew back to London. I lived in his house with his mother and his sister. We shared a room upstairs, and we had a living room with an upright piano, and that's where we practiced. We listened, like I said, it was great.
That is the coolest freaking story, man.
It was a very humble little house in Shepherd's Bush, London, one of those row houses, his mother was like deep Cockney, very humble people, but
I think he said his whole family, like their place got blown to smithereens during the Blitzkrieg too. Like the one thing that was remaining was an acoustic piano. That was it.
Yeah. So that was my start with Brian, and from there on, we split up. I went my separate ways, and then eventually finished up at Ronnie Scott's. And I'll tell you one of the reasons I got the gig at Ronnie Scott's, by the way. Right? I mean, there were many, many bass players in London, many, locals.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was an immigrant. I wasn't even a local, right?
Right.
And the reason I got the gig is because the money was so bad. No one else wanted to do the gig.
In today's world, it was like $5 a night, or how bad was it?
let's say, well, I don't know what guys get paid.
I
What,
know.
what guys?
By the way, just to let you know, whether or not you knew this or not, when you exited out of music, the cats that have continued to make it part of their, whether they teach or play gigs, whatever, the pay for a musician for a live gig has not gone up since 1984.
Wow.
So in any event, but I can't imagine the. I can't imagine how bad it must have been, because the trade-off was like, it was essentially getting a little money, a little scholarship to go to get a doctorate. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the money was £5 a night, which is £30 a week in cash, no checks, no taxes declared. Money in the palm of your hand on Saturday night, and it was £30. Well, now I could live on that because I had no financial responsibilities of any kind. I didn't owe any money. I had a really cheap place to live, right? I didn't squander or piss away money. I had real basic stuff. I think I had 2 basses at one point, couple of suits to wear on the gig, half a dozen shirts, couple of cool pairs of shoes, and that's it.
A French press coffee maker. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's and a record player. Yeah.
Dude, that is. So can you? I just want you to. Did you do? Not that you were in it. You did play with Julie Driscoll and Brian, though. You did.
No, I never did play with that group.
Okay, well let's get to Wikipedia and get that off your Wikipedia page.
Yeah, no, I never did play with them.
Okay, no. So you played with Brian in
we played
acoustic settings.
Yes, we had a gig at the Pigalle. That was the gig that John joined us at, and a drummer named Phil Canora and Glenn Hughes, a baritone sax player. We played. The Pigalle was in Piccadilly Circus, near Piccadilly Circus. It was like a supper club, like a big theater with tables and chairs where people had dinner, and a big stage with curtains, and they had dancing girls and a ventriloquist,
I love that. Yeah, no, this is the magical time of music. You had women with pigeons flying out of their blouses. Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
There you go. All that stuff. And we were the intermission band. So we would come on and we play, songs of the day, maybe a couple of Beatles songs, but we played them in this kind of cool. I played upright. I didn't play electric, I never played
you were dragging your upright around. That's good,
Oh, yeah. Well, those days they had those wonderful cabs in London where you could step in with an upright bass in the back. They still have those cabs. They're fabulous. But you can't do that in New York anymore. Most bass players now have those, stick basses, the uprights with no body.
Right. Did you play in between the hiatus or the time you took off? Did you play any officers' clubs or gentlemen? Can you relate to what he was talking about with Yankee Doodle Dandy and those kinds of things?
No, I never did any of those gigs. I have no idea what he was talking about there.
Yeah.
When I left the Pigalle gig, which is when John left, I think John left. Called Mayfair. I played in Harry's Bar. 6-night-a-week gigs. Start at 8, finish at 12. A piano player, a drummer who sang, and it was enough money to live on. It was probably like 30-40 pounds a week, which is enough basic to live on. But Ronnie's gig, what I was talking about, why no one else wanted to do it, was the money was really bad. And when you consider, you're playing with the top American jazz musicians, it would have been would have made sense to say, listen, I want £100 a night for this gig.
Absolutely.
Not £30 a week. I want £100 a night. Would have been about the right price. But no, so I did it because, first of all, it was just an amazing learning gig. Second of all, I could live on the money. And third of all, I was saving money to go to Boston. And that's what I did.
You know that's I'm so glad you brought that up because I just transcribed. I did an interview with Gene Perla. Were you in the same class as Gene?
I knew Gene very well back in Boston.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, because I mean this is the magic. This is I feel like Dick Burke's spirit is over me right now because it was like you and Jan and Gene Perla and Mark Levine and I don't know Don Elias was in that
Right.
mix somewhere.
Oh,
but
yeah.
but
Yeah.
like so Perla, I was fantasizing about he had this stone. I just put this post up. He had a stone Latin gig. Like it was not Latin jazz. It was like they played at Latin discotheques or not even disco. They were just playing. They were a dance band. It was him and this guy Dick Mezza and Mark Levine and Don Elias. And I was like, you know, how could you possibly? I mean, like you talk about Ronnie Scott's being the best education, and I said, was that the definitive moment of growth in your musical career, or is that? I mean, what was something? Was that the best education you got at the academy known as Berkeley at the time, which was it was not what it is today? But he said that there was this defining moment, and I'm going to try to get the quote up here. He said, let's see here. He said, we took a class called Four-Way Close. It's a melody line of a standard tune they would give to us, mostly from the American Songbook. They would give you the melodies with the chords, and the exercise would be okay. So you know what that is. He said that when he had to play it on the piano first, and then he had to write out the horn parts, and then it was an exhaustive process. But when he put that music in front of you guys. Not necessarily you were bass player as well, but I mean like the horn players. And when he first heard them playing his original composition, he was like, holy crap, I can really write music. He said that was the defining, and it was inspiring to me because I said, you know, I don't know if that it goes on in the same way. I mean, listen, I mean, to be honest with you, man, it sounds surreal. The place that you were in, the classrooms were like bedrooms. I mean, it was like it was so intimate and so like to me it represented, you know, the other side of the Joe Henderson brothel jazz. It also represented this like, you know, like this like communal workspace, you know, like a workshop, like the jazz work, like it was a workshop, you know, and like you guys were in bedrooms and like jamming together and working out. The point is he got this, he realized he had a gift. And I wonder if you had something similar in the academy, because I don't want to just be down on the academy. I want to believe that you guys actually, because he dismissed the whole live playing, even though he was playing 6 nights, like you were 6 nights a week, 3 sets a night, seventh day, this is once he left to go to New York. But the point is, was there a road to Damascus moment for Rick Laird at Berkeley?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the greatest fears I had in London and all through that period was, I'm a fraud. I can't read music. Yes, I've got great ears and I can read chord symbols, but I can't read notes. And I was absolutely terrified about that because I figured someone's going to catch me and say, you know, you don't belong here, right? So given that motivation, that's my motivation to go to Berkeley, because I knew I would have to confront professional level reading every day. And that's why I got so much value out of it, because I worked in Herb Pomeroy's big band. Ernie Watts, you know.
Wait. Was that the one where Jackie Byard would come sit in?
No, I don't remember that. He may have.
Knock was telling me about that. Was that the band with Knock or no? It was that was
No, that was later.
So he came later. I'm sorry. So Pomeroy's band. You were playing at some shack bar somewhere. I mean, it was pretty kind of a jam session, right?
Well, Pomeroy was one of the main jazz teachers at Berkeley. He taught a class in line writing, which he called. I'm sure Gene did that too.
It's called line writing.
Line writing.
Interesting, yeah, because these cats were the shaman teachers, man. Unreal.
Yeah, no, Herb was a great teacher, and it was an absolutely great course. Everyone who did it got tremendous value out of it. But the main thing was his 15-piece band, which met on Tuesdays and Thursdays downstairs in Berkeley, in the building, and it had the best musicians in the school. All the best players, the best horn players, drummers, etc. And I was chosen bass player. So every day you'd show up, there'd be 4 or 5 or 6 new charts to read at sight. Just lay the paper out, 1, 2, 3, 4, go. Right? Yeah. And you got to read what's on the paper, because if you didn't, Herb would, eat your ass. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So that was a great experience for me. Yeah, it really
can you put it into like terms that obviously, okay, so you were able to read music. You didn't have time to necessarily. I think today you can get an assignment in the academy and work it out and squeeze out all the soul of it and make it and so intellectualize it. Was the learning just much more in the moment? Hit it now. I mean, it wasn't a huge class of people there. It was
no, but it was. You see, it was holistic, because you'd spend mornings you'd spend doing counterpoint, 4-way voice, close writing, like Dean said, harmony, all of that stuff, and then you'd spend the afternoon playing. Or I had a bass teacher, and it was all classical music. My bass teacher taught me everything with a bow, so there was no jazz with the bass teacher. He was a symphony player, which is exactly what I wanted, because I wanted to really be able to bow well too.
Wow. So but you wanted to be able to bow in a jazz context.
No, not in. I wanted to bow in a classical.
You
context.
did. So that you had dreams of being a symphonic player.
I had thought about it, but it was too late for me. You need to start that gig way younger.
The arbitrage, right? Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, there's.
You gotta start. You gotta start at 15. To do that, or even younger. And have a good teacher right at the beginning, because that's a serious gig. But I love symphony bass playing. I still listen to it now. I listen to different orchestras, and I always listen to the basses and think, wow, I wish I could play like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, let me be like when I interviewed the Abe Laboriel, who was a couple years after you at Berkeley. They wouldn't let him graduate. There was no academic literature on the electric bass. Now I know you did, so that wasn't an instrument you could get a degree in. So he had to major in a guitar or something. But at the time, the acoustic bass
was legitimate. It was legitimate.
It was legitimate, but what you're saying is they purposely didn't have a jazz bass instrument. They put a classical instructor of the upright bass in there, or was there?
Well, no, they didn't have jazz bass teachers, because at least that I knew about. But I think that was the right idea, because you need to get a really solid foundation in classical bass fingering if you want to master jazz bass.
Regardless of whether it's a bass fiddle or an electric bass.
Well, now electric bass is a whole other thing.
Okay, so let's just stay with I really want to know the rudiments. So you're saying you have to have the foundations of classical fingering in order to.
Yes, if you want to be like a high level bass player playing with perfect intonation, right? You understand complex fingering patterns on the fingerboard. because you practice them with a bow. And also the bow, because you have to hold notes for a long time, really helps you to nail your intonation, to get perfect intonation, right? Because you're holding the note for a long time, and you can hear if it's out of tune. Oh shit, it's like a quarter tone flat, you know. You know what I mean? You hear it, and you have to really practice in that way. And so when you go to play pizzicato, across the strings much more easily, right? So it's very foundational. So then the jazz playing would be like in Herb's band. Like I said, you show up on Tuesday at 2 o'clock with your bass. He puts down a chart. It's a jazz chart, and you read it. That's how you get to play jazz, right? So it was a great experience. I mean, it definitely changed my whole thing. I felt much more confident about, doing gigs. Like when you show up for a date in New York for a jingle with Don Sebesky, right? It's 5 to 10.
Dude, wait, how many of those were you on that you never got credit for? I mean, I need to know that.
Oh, not that many.
Because guys that preceded Chuck Rainey were like Everett Barksdale, and then Chuck came in, Chuck and Gordon Edwards, and I'm like, Laird probably was on a lot of jingles and commercials, but we'd never know it.
I didn't do a lot of that stuff. Honestly, I never cracked the jingle mafia.
The kings of the studio cats. Yeah, no, I mean
Right.
It's unreal. Before we wrap up part set 2 here, I just wanted to ask you, not that you knew him very well, or even maybe not even played with him, but I'm so humble to be able to really, sometimes I wonder in this journey why I'm doing what I'm doing, and part of it is the voice, and for people to be able to hear voices from the past that people they used to know very well or maybe idolized, and there's only one available radio interview with this cat, and I did it with him, and I thank Gene Perla for it, and we just lost him, and that was Steve Grossman.
Oh yeah.
And I was wondering he was so funny because every time he was ready to leave his thinking mind and sort of get playful, he would snap back and get a little bit guarded. But I mean, there's no denying he was a great player, and I just wanted you to talk a little bit about, from your point of view, what his legacy is.
Well, honestly, I didn't get involved in their music a whole lot. I mean, I knew the group Stone Alliance, right?
I'm even talking about were you hip to the Miles band he was in?
Yes, yeah. Well, it was interesting. I was reading a post, I think it was Dave Lehman posted it, and he was talking about the legacy of, he called it the Jewish saxophone mafia.
Absolutely. Dude, it's like They thought it was a law firm,
Yeah, you had Grossman, you had Liebman, you had Brecker,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I mean, they were all just amazing. I mean, they were just at that time.
Unreal, man.
I mean, you might say they were a continuation of Train's trance music. I'm not sure if that would be accurate.
That is interesting. I'm gonna have to. I mean, because it did ride on the heels of Train passing in '67. You're right about that.
Yeah, they carried the torch. Those guys, basically carried the torch forward. And still do. I mean, Liebman's still out there.
But they were really part of the subculture. I mean, you were not. You were in the States. Did you see that live Evil band at the workshop, or I mean, were you like? Did you get what was?
I never really did. You
Yeah.
know, I never really did. I kind of had lost interest at that point. I didn't go to live gigs much anymore. Although,
I just love the fact that you lost interest in arguably one of the most fertile times in my mind in musical history. And you're
Well,
like,
what-
I lost interest because you had been playing on the bandstand with all these giants for years. You know, it's like, but I mean, because it seemed like it kind of, I mean, and I am not a huge, I mean, I love Miles's vibe and how inspirational he is, but I don't pour over his records. But I do sort of feel that that the chaos, as you talked about with the orchestra, was not similar. I mean, you were channeling some kind of interesting chaos that was similar to that live evil band with Grossman, you know. And I'm just, and
Right.
I think there probably was an electric bass in that band. He might have had an electric and an upright, but like when you know, Gene said that he eventually got to New York, and after a couple years, he got a gig with Nina Simone, and then
right.
the drummer wasn't working out, so I just put this up this morning. I mean, he was telling me, he's like, it was just so classic. He got Elias on the gig, and Elias would play traps, and he'd play congas, and they'd swing. Like Nina wasn't a swinging musician, but they'd swing with Elias on congas, and that was Perla's like first big gig in New York. And what was your first gig in New York before the orchestra?
Before the orchestra, well, one of the things that Ronnie Scott's had to do in order to get permission by the British Musicians Union to allow these American musicians to play in London was to make an exchange. And one of the deals was Ronnie Scott's quartet would play at the Half Note in New York for a week.
Wow.
So on
So
May
cool.
in May '65, I came to New York. I'd never been before. I was 24 years old, and very, very impressed with New York. We stayed at the President Hotel in Times Square.
It wasn't a brothel.
No, it wasn't a brothel.
Although, 52nd Street was still rocking and rolling at that point, I think.
It was funky.
Yeah,
It was
it was funky.
definitely not as fancy as it is these days.
No,
but it
not
was
even close.
But we played the Half Note for a week, and that was nice. And then, so that was my first gig.
What year was that? It was 65.
65.
Wow. So whoa. Okay, continue.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think other gigs before Mahavishnu. No, because when I came to New York, it was to join Mahavishnu, so there were no other gigs before that in New York.
Interesting. So wait, hold on. But you went back. I'm just trying to get the chronology. 60.
I went back.
When did you go to Berkeley?
to New York.
69?
I went to Berkeley in '66, and I left Boston in '69 to join Buddy Rich's band. I stayed on the band on and off for about a year. And the last gig I did with Buddy, he was going to Europe, and I agreed to get off the band in London. So I went back to London at the end of '70, right at the end of '70. And my plan was, I didn't want to live in America anymore. It was Nixon, Agnew, and all that shit, and the Vietnam War. And I thought,
It was a mess,
no thanks, I'm going home. So I went back to London. And I'm taking my marbles and going home.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And it was tough because, everything had changed. Ronnie's had changed. There was no more of a house band thing. I was just another bass player looking for a gig in London. I was married at the time to my first and now one of my exes.
How many exes you have?
2.
Oh, nice. Wow. I only have one. That's go ahead. Yeah, I guess you go through them. Anyway, so then John called you at that point.
Yeah, so I was in London for several months, and then in '71, I was I was starting to get some gigs, nothing great, but it was okay. And then he sent me a cable, I think. It was not in the phone call. It was a cable arrived. People still sell cables.
I love this. Of course, Johnny would send a cable.
Right.
Yeah.
So and a plane ticket for two. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that.
What was it? Was it one for you and one for your base, or to bring your wife too?
Bring the wife, yeah.
Bring the wife.
I think we had to pay for the base, yeah.
And you have any idea how much it was to move into an apartment when you got into New York?
Well, John had actually set up a little apartment for us out in Queens, near where he lived, because he lived near Sri Chinmoy.
Well, did he live in the ashram, or did he live near the ashram?
He lived near the ashram.
Okay.
It was in Kew Gardens where I lived. But, and, we made very, very modest money. I don't want to get into numbers, but I'm sure the other guys have talked about it. I mean, it wasn't really enough to live on. My wife got a gig in the city right away, and that allowed us to kind of make it, But the early months were tough.
Well, but I mean, you're just talking about before you got the record deal from Columbia, or
yeah, no, we were just rehearsing.
Exactly.
No,
yeah, I mean that's pretty. Because
no, he had the record deal already.
Yeah, he did. Okay. Interesting. So, Buddy Rich, I mean, okay, I've heard everything. I just, I'm so glad you brought him up, because we will wrap up this session. I just did another interview with. Did you ever cross paths with Mike Mainieri?
Yes. Yeah. The Vibes player, right?
Exactly. So. He told this insane story, and I want to read it to you and then see if it just shows you how much, well, it's stunning, actually. Here you go. Buddy Rich, this was, I guess around, you were probably getting together with Auger at this point, but so this is about 60. He goes, Buddy Rich was on a State Department tour in 61. The Russians were in town doing their thing, so we were in town for a couple of weeks. This is in Afghanistan. The tour was put together by a well-connected ex-vaudevillian by the name of Joey Adams. We took a C-47 Air Force prop plane, which was dilapidated, taking us to the Himalayas. Our first gig was in Kabul. They built this stage, and it looked like a big drive-in movie because they had this big screen behind us. The show consisted of 3 girl singers from Idaho, and there was Chaz Chase, who was a little bit of a musician, and a guy who blew up balloons and made little animals out of them. There was a woman musician who had all these veils and these pigeons flying out of her. This is the weirdest show of all time. Then there was Buddy's band. Johnny Morris played piano, Rolf Erickson on trumpet, Sam Most on sax and flute, Wyatt Ruther on bass, and myself. We would back up the show. So they'd back up all those vaudevillian shows, and then we would play our set, maybe 3 jazz tunes, and then Buddy would step out and tap dance with Joey Adams and the 4 Step Brothers. I would play drums on Buddy's roadie would play drums. Then the show would end, and we'd be there in front of 2,000 Afghans in the desert looking at us like, what the hell is going on? And he said, from there, we went to Calcutta, New Delhi, Bombay, Madras, Bangladesh, Kathmandu, Nepal. We played for Sakharov, who was the dictator of Indonesia at the time. I mean, that doesn't sound real, and yet it was. I mean, did you, with the orchestra, get a chance to go to places that essentially were still in the dark, to a degree? There was a lot of Cold War stuff going on, but you were able to go. Like, I know that Liebman took his band to Calcutta, and it was very heavy because, whatever, there were like dead bodies in the street. But I mean, did you get to play in these timeless lands at all?
No, we didn't really. The most kind of, I would say, exotic, maybe the right word, place we went is Japan. And I remember very vividly, we got to Hiroshima.
Yes.
And we took a tour of the original site of the explosion. and the museum, and that was probably the most startling thing I encountered on that whole experience.
I believe that's the one where there's like shadows of people's bodies, or there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah.
they have an amazing museum, and they have some buildings that are still standing from the explosion. But the museum is really just, you can't imagine what happened. It was horrifying, just beyond words.
Wow.
And that's part of the karma of America. We did that. We the people did that to those people. It's horrible. It's just horrible karma. But this country, we don't want to go there today.
No, we don't. I do want to ask you before you go, what's your and I'm being very serious because I've interviewed people like David Nichtern, who is somewhat unknown in music, but he was a great folk musician, and he penned Maria Muldaur's classic hit "Midnight at the Oasis," which I know you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And then he became a teacher of meditation and mindful meditation, and he's really articulate and super cool guy, your generation. And I did a couple of interviews with him, and the last one I did was maybe a month before the 2016 election, and I wouldn't call him, I think everybody always working on their ego, but he's very forthright in what he believes, and he just said, when I asked him about the election, he said, that man will not win. And he was talking about Trump, and he went on this litany of high moral justification reasons and just sort of Eastern philosophical reasons why Trump would not win. Mm-hmm. And yet he won. And it has nothing to do, I just bring up Nichtern because I believe he has some street cred in the world of, just sort of expanding consciousness, which is what we desperately need right now. So, at least he was gutsy enough to go out on a limb. And I want to ask Rick Laird, what is your expectation for what is your prediction for November?
Oh boy, that's tough.
What does your gut tell you, though? I mean, because what does your gut tell you? That because nobody can see the future, but
I would say chaos for sure.
A lot of blood, a lot of death.
I don't want to promote anything horrifying, but you're
not promoting anything. I just kind of want to. Everybody has their own vibe. So when you say chaos, I mean we've been living in chaos. So I mean it's.
Yes, well this is chaos already, but it's possible that if he loses and really protests big time, that we could have something approaching civil war. I really think that's possible. I'm certainly hoping it's not even close to happening, but given the insanity of the situation with him and his pathetic, cowardly GOP enablers, and the help of William Barr especially, it could turn very, very ugly real quick.
What would be? I'm just asking you to speak to people as you are just a cat who has made a lot of decisions. You've picked up your marbles and left, and then you've been brought back into certain arenas based on divine timing. Have you ever seen or been part, or have you ever had any kind of, not association, but have you ever been tried to get wrapped up into a cult? How do you break? How do you break a cult? Because that's I've never, in my readings or understandings of cults, it never ends peacefully. And that's what this is. It can, though. I'm just saying, is there an experience in your life when you can look back and say,
I walked away from Scientology.
And that is a call. Okay, so that's mind blowing. I can't believe you're dropping that information right now. You got hip to that in the States or when you were in England?
I got into it because of Chick Corea.
Of course you did.
Yes, in 1977, and stayed in for about 6 years. I don't want to get into it.
I don't want. No. I don't want you. But I'm saying But this is not. I mean, that's one. This is more of a. This is a satanic cult with Trump. This is not. This is. I mean, Scientology might have some perversions.
No, Scientology is harmless compared to Trump.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, this is what concerns me when you talk about a mini civil war. It's like the enablers are such that they are. It's so twisted, but they are afraid of a cult, and I don't know even.
They are a cult, and they are. Right. You know, Trump is basically Hitler version 2.
Yes.
2.0. He's Hitler 2.0.
Yeah, in fact, if he wasn't stymied, ironically enough, by Jeff Sessions for the first 3 years, would be in much worse shape right now.
Yes. And if he wins, God help us all. And I'm not religious.
No, I understand. I mean, I have to keep separating what I want to have happen versus what I think will happen, and I remember specifically in September of 2016, one day in the car, feeling like sick to my stomach, and this was before the election, but I just felt, I said, he's going to win this thing. And I don't feel that sort of feeling right now because of...
I have more hope this time because of the convention last week. I think it was very successful given the limitations of the whole thing.
Well, actually, it should be integrated full time now. I don't need those conventions anymore. It was done.
Right.
That was like very prescient, made it more intimate. You didn't have to deal with all the vanity of it. And it just sort of, I didn't watch it all, but that's what most people said. It was well done. And then we're going to get the apocalypse.
We're going to get the circus. We're going to get
I don't know. It's not a circus. That Mike Mainieri and Buddy Rich, that was fun. That's a circus. This is... Yeah. Demonic cult-like behavior, and but you can say that you fundamentally left the people can break away from a cult mentality.
Yes, but you have to you have to take responsibility for your own choices.
Absolutely.
You can't allow the outside to interfere. You have to say, okay, my values are, and then be clear about it and say, I don't want a country like that, and go and vote on that. Right? That's all you have to do. I don't want this shit going on in our country. Let's make it stop. And that's called voting. But when it's become so corrupted that they take over the freaking post office to make sure people can't vote, that's straight out of Hitler version 2. That's ridiculous. And thankfully Nancy Pelosi and the rest of them are back in Washington today to oppose that. And I wish them the best of luck. I hope they
they don't have a working partner. They don't have a functional Republican Party because they've sold their soul to this cult. And
it's absurd what's happened to the GOP. It's just absurd. They should be absolutely, deeply ashamed of themselves. I mean,
and that's the problem with a lot of monotheistic believers is that they get so absorbed within their connection to this higher power that's given them all this quote-unquote power that anything that relates to guilt, accountability, or shame, they will just project that out into the rest of the world and never really take full accountability for their own actions, because in their mind their source power has given them this opportunity to have all these benefits. And and just the fever and the rot and the understanding that so many of these cats on the Republican side are, I don't want to insult people, but they're really working against the best interest of their constituency. So I don't understand it. And I guess that's the other thing is that you said, I don't want this shit going down in my country, but I also look at it and I say, well, isn't this what has always been going on, except you just have somebody at the top who has no mores, and has a bugle horn for what the underbelly of this country has always been. Has it really ever been different?
No, it hasn't. No.
Right. So this time around, it would be ideally an extinction of this.
Someone described it as being, it's always been there, but Trump tore the scab off it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tend to talk to a lot of lately a lot of healers, and my tendency is to be able to take off some scar tissue in their psyche, but do it in a way where the wound can heal and they can feel inspired, as opposed to just tearing it off and abusing all the norms, which really mean like sanity or balance, and it leaves people. I think no matter what, adaptability is key. And it's inspiring. I think the thing you said about moving towards just using technology to continue your teaching of photography.
Yeah.
It's inspiring for younger cats in music, although I would argue that a young Rick Laird, a hungry Rick Laird, I don't know what you would do if the new normal was playing front porch concerts on Instagram Live or Facebook Live. I don't know if you would be happy about that. I don't know if you would adapt to that, but that's
I don't know how you could possibly grow like that. The growth we all had back in the day was because we were playing, 3 sets a night, 6 nights a week. That's how you grow. You don't grow playing 1 gig a week for an hour.
Well, what I'm saying is, even in the new normal of, the idea of no longer being able to have communal spiritual music indoors with people, where you're literally playing to a camera, it's especially if you have a certain aesthetic and you're young and hungry, it's really demoralizing because you just don't feel like you're really being yourself if you're doing that. There's a lot more to get to. We just went off for another almost 2 hours. We'll let's do another one as we get closer to a dawn of a new day or Armageddon.
Yes,
all right.
Yeah. Just please let me know where I can hear this, because I have a couple of friends who'd like to check it out.
Have you've heard the first one, right?
I don't think I did.
That's been one of the most. That's been downloaded over 100 times, and I have I'm so bummed you haven't heard it yet. Okay, yeah, of course. I have like a 2% following in Ireland because of you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, it was. It's always good to hear you, man. Please stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, take care of yourself, Jake.
All right, brother.
Bye-bye.
Later, man. Heavy day of bass on the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back in about 10 minutes with Tony Levin. Until then, peace.
You know,
well, 95% of it was what we call 6/8 or 12/8.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a lilting 8 notes and 16th notes. Uh-huh.
You know,
well, it's hard to. That's hard to say what I meant by that, because that may be the wrong way to put that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that he was extremely talented, and he could play that instrument like no one else could. No one. I can't remember anyone ever playing with that ferociousness. That's other guys that I played with at that time, and I also played with the white group. That, I mean, not to delineate or anything, but of course that's the way it was then. And there were, the thing about Detroit was you could go almost somewhere like 18 hours a day, any day of the week, and play. And that was one of the reasons why Detroit was so rich in its musical output. I mean, just think of, all the people, Milt Jackson, God, you could go on for hours.
It's ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous. And there were these different generations. I mean, like, Yusef Lateef was a generation, or he was years older than Kenny Burrell's generation, but it was like this lineage was so intense. Then also, the idea that John Lee Hooker, the blues was side by side. There was no labels. I mean, it was all meshing together. This is the richness of it, Preston. Now, Don, I want to be clear about something, because listen, there are a lot of cats. We're not delineating by people of color or what their skin color looks like. But when you say playing black, does that mean
Well, it's hard to. That's hard to say what I meant by that, because that may be the wrong way to put that.
Mm-hmm.